I grew up in the northeast side of Indianapolis, and I can remember in that time, the 500, it was always on Memorial Day, not just Memorial Day weekend. And I can remember when the wind was blowing a certain direction, you could actually hear the engines clear across the city because the speedway was in the southwest corner of the city. So Indianapolis was known primarily as the home of the Indy 500. Here's something else. It was also known, especially in the Midwest, as the Circle City. You see, the fathers who designed the city in those early days had designed it in a very unique way. At the center of the city, they built this circle street. And in the center of that circle, the intention was to place the governor's mansion. Well, that never happened. In the years between 1887 and 1902, they built a monument known as the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, several stories high. It was kind of a magical place at Christmas time because they would string Christmas lights from the street all the way to the top of it, like a giant Christmas tree. And then they would place Christmas scenes all around the bottom. And so as kids, we would go down and our parents would take us down and we could drive around the circle and see all of this Christmas stuff. Very, very magical, beautiful. They still do that today. Oh, and by the way, on New Year's, the common practice was at midnight to take your car downtown to the Monument Circle and go around the circle honking your horn. A special place. The unique design of the city was this. It was kind of designed like a wheel or a spider web. And the main drags were these. There was North Meridian and South Meridian. There was East Market and West Market. And if you were going south on North Meridian, you ended up at Monument Circle. If you were going north on South Meridian, you ended up at Monument Circle. If you were going west on East Market, you ended up at Monument Circle. And if you were going east on West Market, you ended up at Monument Circle. You see, all of those streets ran to the same place, took you to the same place. I think that's a picture of the way many people today see this matter of connecting with God. They see it this way, that if you want to connect with God, there are many paths to take you there. There are many roads that will take you to that place. As far as the major ancient religions of our world, there was the Muslim way, there was the Hindu way, there was the ancient Orthodox Jewish way, there was the way of Confucius. And in our modern day, you add to that the way of beliefs like Mormonism and Scientology and Christian Science and Jehovah's Witness and so on and so forth. And so there are a lot of people that believe there are many ways to connect with God. You rub shoulders with those people every day. You work with them. Some of you live with them in families. Some of you have neighbors and friends that believe that. It all gets rather confusing because you can find many, many sincere, good people devotedly following one of these ways that they believe lead to connection with God. And so the question arises, and this is what I want to talk to you about this morning. Are there many paths to God? Are there many paths to God? And in connection with that, is sincerity enough? Or can a person be sincerely dead wrong when it comes to connecting with God? Is there a fundamental difference then between the path of Christianity and the other so-called paths? By the way, there is an increasing number of people who believe that there are many paths to God. Several years ago, a study was done by the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life, and it had some surprising results. For example, they discovered that at that time, 70% of Americans believed there were many paths to God. 70%. Even more surprising, 65% of those who would profess to follow the Christian religion believed that there are other ways to God. Now, here's the most startling statistic of all. 56% of those who call themselves evangelical Christians believe that there are many paths to God other than saving faith in Christ. I don't know about you, but that startles me. Now, if the survey were taken today, I'm convinced it would be even worse. That's the day in which we live. And so they believe that in spite of the fact that Jesus himself stated that there is only one way to God. In fact, listen to his words found in John 14, verse 6. I am the way, the truth, the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. I didn't say that. You didn't say that. Jesus said it. No one comes to the Father but through me. Now, we live in a world today where tolerance is considered to be a supreme value. Okay? We live in a world of endless options. And in such a world, these words of Jesus come across as being very narrow-minded and exclusive. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. The idea that there are many paths to God in a theological sense would be called universalism or pluralism. Well, with the popularity of universalism and pluralism today, you and I, as I've said, rub shoulders with people every day who have vastly different views on this thing of connecting with God. They have varying perceptions of God himself and what a good life entails. They have varying perceptions of what human nature really is and what really makes up a good person. They have varying perceptions. If they believe in God at all, they have these very different viewpoints as to what kind of a life pleases God. That's the reality of our society and our culture today. I had a friend before coming to this church in 1985, we pastored for 10 years in San Diego, and while I was out there, I had a friend who had a favorite saying. This was his saying, get this. He says, I heard him say it many times, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Now think about that. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Dennis Hollinger was a professor at Gordon Conwell Seminary up in the Northeast, and he makes this statement concerning the dilemma, in view of that, the dilemma that you and I face as Bible-believing Christians. He writes, as we daily live with a plethora of worldviews, we experience many of these folks to be exceptionally fine people who often reflect integrity, high morals, and even outstanding contributions to our communities. Now, I want you to especially get this last sentence. He states, these facts make it increasingly difficult to entertain any notions other than that there are multiple paths to God and salvation. Now, he's just expressing reality. He doesn't believe that. He's just saying it makes it very difficult when we look around us and when we consider some of our friends that are on a different path and think that's the right path. You know, we're accused of being judgmental and narrow. You see, the fact still remains that Jesus himself stated clearly, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. Now, that's a pretty unambiguous statement, isn't it? It's pretty straightforward. So in light of that, how do we explain and reconcile this with our friends who are believing that there are many paths to God? How do we reconcile that to our friends who believe that? Well, I want to attempt to answer that question by addressing three other related questions that comes from Jesus' statement. And first, the first question is this: are there other ways? Are there other ways? Now, another way to state that question is this: are all religions the same? Are they all the same? Now, many today, as I already stated, would say that there are many ways. Even some who profess to be followers of Jesus Christ, evidently, would state that. I read a quote from a leader of a large Christian denomination. He was talking about this situation, and this is what he said. This is how he responded. My religion is Christianity. It's a wonderful religion. It meets my needs. But Christianity is only one way of several ways to God. Now get this. He was a leader of a large Christian denomination. All ways are good, he said. If you would like to know about the way I follow, I'll tell you. But I can't say Christianity is better than your religion. You'll have to decide what's best for you. By the way, do you know what Jesus would call such a teacher? He would call such a teacher a false teacher. Come on, let's don't mince any words about that. He would call such a teacher a false teacher who is leading many astray. Folks, we have a bunch of those in our society today, leading many folks astray. Jesus himself spoke to this. It's recorded in Matthew 24, verse 11, and I'm reading the Message version. And again, Jesus is speaking, and he says this: in the confusion, parentheses, he was referring to the confusion like what is being experienced today. So in the confusion, lying preachers will come forward and deceive a lot of people. Folks, we need to be aware of this. It's going on all around us. You see, today it is an increasingly accepted idea that though there may be surface level differences between various religions, if you boil them all down to their essentials, they're all the same. I have a very sophisticated word for that statement. Baloney. You understand that word? I know it's a highfalutin word, but, you know, that's just not true. And they would conclude that it doesn't really matter which one you follow. Now, here's the bottom line statement that those people who believe this, and I've had it said to me, Pastor, sincerely believing what you believe is important. Now, on the surface, that sounds logical. But what they mean by that is that sincerity is really the main issue. It's really the main issue. Now, I'm always a bit mystified by that statement because we don't believe that about anything else in our life. You know, when I pull out of my driveway to go somewhere, I do so knowing that not any street or road will take me to that destination. I can sincerely believe that it will, but it won't get me there. I can have a GPS, and I've even had my GPS get me lost. You know, now that lady, whoever she is in that GPS, knows the way and believes that way, but even she's gotten me lost because the GPS evidently hasn't been updated to a new street in the area. Or more likely, I put in the wrong information. Okay? So sincerely believing that when I take off, Francie and I take off on a trip, that the road we're on is going to get me there, sincerity has nothing to do with that. I can sincerely believe that and be on the wrong road. Now, she wouldn't use the word sincerely. She would use the word stubborn. Come on, guys. She would use the word stubborn. My stubbornly believing that would not necessarily get me to where we're going. And it's happened, I have to confess, on a number of occasions. You know, when I'm sick, or when you're sick and you're needing surgery, sincerity believing that the particular surgeon you go to sincerely believe has really nothing to do with the success of the surgery. Sincerity has nothing to do with it, right? You know, it's more having to do with the doctor's training and the doctor's skill, the doctor's gifts, okay? Sincerity has nothing to do with it. We left this church in 2007, and in the intervening time over the last several years, we've been working with an organization in churches all over the country, a year at a time, in interim basis, helping churches refocus on mission. And we would always fly home to Alabama once a month. So we logged a lot of air miles, Francie and I did. A lot of air miles. I can never remember one. Oh, by the way, often when we would get on the plane, the pilot would be standing in the door of the cockpit welcoming people on. I can remember no instance where I walked up to the pilot and said, I know you're going to get us to where we need to go because I sincerely believe that. Doesn't depend on sincerity. We've been reminded of that the last few weeks, haven't we? With the plane crashes that have taken place. And I've gotten aboard a plane, and when we landed, we were at a different airport because of weather. You know. So sincerity has nothing to do with it. We don't believe that sincerity has anything to do with the major issues in our life. I may be sincere, but I may be sincerely wrong. That's the fact. And so Jesus boldly declared, I am the way. I am the way. And then he backed up his words by providing the way. He did what he said he would do. He laid down his sinless life, dying in my place. He was crucified on a cross, as he referred to earlier in his earthly ministry, and he arose on the third day. He did exactly what he said he would do. And in all of that, Jesus built a bridge from my unholy self to his holy heavenly Father, to a holy God. And it's a bridge for me to walk over, for you to walk over by faith and connect with God. Contemporary theologian R.C. Sproul puts it this way: Moses could mediate on the law. Muhammad could brandish the sword. Buddha could give personal counsel. Confucius could offer wise sayings. But none of these men was qualified to offer an atonement for the sins of the world. Jesus alone is qualified. So are there other ways? Are all religions the same? No, says Jesus emphatically. And he says it by word and action. I am the way. I am not one among many ways. I am the only way to connect with God. Second question, are there many equally valid truths? Another way to put it is this: just because Jesus says, I am the way, does it make it so? Does it make it so? Can he be believed? Now, many people today believe in the historical Jesus. They believe that he was a good man and even a good moral teacher. But they hesitate with the idea that he was God. They just find that idea to be rather suspicious. So the claim, being true, the claim that by him that he's the only way to know God, the only way to connect with God, the only way to find forgiveness from God, should be questioned. That's what they think. In another place in the Gospels, his disciples asked him to show them the Father. Do you remember how he answered? He said, if you see me, if you're looking at me right now, you're seeing God. You are seeing the Father. Well, in response to what he said about himself, and in contrast to what many today say about him, that he was just a good man and a good moral teacher, philosopher and author C.S. Lewis of Chronicles of Narnia fame writes this in one of his books. The one thing that we must not say is that Jesus was a good man and a good teacher only. See, a man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level of the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else he was a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him, you can kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. That's the only choices. In other words, what Lewis was saying was that you cannot say that he was just a good man, just a good teacher of morality. The fact is that Jesus claimed to be God. And then he validated his claim by living a perfect life, by performing miracles, by making promises and keeping those promises. And the greatest example of promises kept was his death on a cross and his resurrection on the third day. The greatest example. Now, one of the things that is often said by people today is this statement. Maybe you've heard it. I've heard it before. They say, well, what you say may be valid for you. That's your truth. It works for you. But it's not my truth. I have my truth that works for me, and you have your truth that works for you, and that's okay. Now, I want to make clear that it's important that we be tolerant of people who believe different than we do. It's important that we be tolerant. As Christians, we are to be loving and respectful of people of other faiths. If you have a neighbor who's involved in an Eastern mystical faith, you need to be loving and kind to them and treat them right. You see, in fact, our country guarantees that all religions are protected. But don't make the mistake of thinking that just because in our free society, as it should be, all religions are protected, that all religions are equally true. See, sometimes we jump in our logic to that. Don't make that mistake. You see, Jesus declared very forthrightly, I am the truth. He didn't say, I speak the truth. Though that's a pretty powerful statement in itself. Many people say that. Even some politicians, have you noticed? Many people say that. But Jesus said something quite different. He said, I am the truth. The fact that all religions are protected in our society has nothing to do with whether or not they are based on truth. So how do we know that Jesus' claim is true? Well, you like me probably grew up as kids with the Dr. Seuss books. Remember those? Dr. Seuss. I especially have been enamored by his fantastical characters. You know, the Cat in the Hat, the Lorks, and the Grinch. But really my favorite is a guy by the name of Horton. Do you remember who Horton was? Horton, he was an elephant. Horton was an elephant, and Horton one day was walking through the neighborhood, and he ran across a mother bird sitting on a nest, and she was so tired of sitting on the eggs that she was complaining, and Horton, being the compassionate soul that he was, said, why don't you take a break and I'll sit on the eggs. Now that's an amazing picture in itself, an elephant sitting on eggs. So she left, and he sat on the eggs, and she was supposed to come back, and she didn't come back. And longer went by, and she didn't come back, and hours and days and weeks went by, and she didn't show back up. In the meantime, his friends would walk by and make fun of him and criticize him. Do you remember what Horton's response to those who made fun of him and criticized him was? This was his response. I said what I meant, and I meant what I said. An elephant's faithful 100%. Now, Jesus could really say that. I said what I meant, and I meant what I said. I keep my promises 100%. And he kept the big one, his death and resurrection. That's the big one. Now, here's the conclusion for you and me that I hope encourages you this morning. Because he kept the big one, he's going to keep the little ones too. He's going to keep the smaller promises. Because he kept the big one. The Apostle Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 20, these words, whatever God promised gets stamped with the yes of Jesus. Gets stamped with the yes of Jesus. Now, that's what Christianity and the gospel proclaims that is uniquely different from other religions and their claims. Well, in spite of all of this, there are those who look at Christianity, look at our faith, and look at our claims as Christians, that Jesus is the only way and the only valid truth, and they see it as being way too narrow and way too exclusive. So this brings me to the third and final question. Are Christians being narrow-minded by believing there is only one way and one valid truth? Now, I would have to agree that Christians' belief is narrow-minded if there are many paths to God and we're just saying that ours is best. That's being narrow-minded. However, that is not what biblical Christianity says. What biblical Christianity says is this, in essence: our sin, our wrongdoing as human beings separates us from our Creator God, the one who loves us supremely. It is a problem that all of us hold in common, and that we cannot solve ourselves. And if it is not solved, it will result in our separation from the God who created us and the God who loves us forever and ever. We can't even depend on our own efforts. We can't solve the problem ourselves. God has decreed that the soul that sins shall die, and by death he's talking about spiritual death, separation from him. But God solves the problem by sending his Son, Jesus Christ, to give his life on the cross and to be resurrected on the third day. And that's the gospel in a nutshell. That's it. Now, every other religion that I know depends on people doing something somehow to earn the favor of God. They say you have to use a Tibetan prayer wheel, or you have to make a journey to Mecca, or you have to pray a certain prayer, or you have to go through a series of reincarnations, or you have to attend certain lectures from some guru. Christianity says you don't have to do any of that stuff. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You see, Christianity doesn't say do. Christianity says done. Done. It's accomplished through Jesus. The price has been paid. The only thing we need to do is confess our need and be willing to change as God's Spirit enables us to change, or as we allow God's Spirit to enable us to change, and receive the free gift of salvation. That makes Christianity totally, totally unique from all of the faith beliefs, other faith beliefs in the world. Totally unique. I like the Apostle Paul's words in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 7 through 9. In these words that he wrote to the first century church and to us, he writes this, and I'm reading from the Message version. Now God has us where he wants us, with all of the time in this world and the next, to shower grace and kindness upon us in Christ Jesus. Saving is all his idea and all his work. All we do is trust him enough to let him do it. It's God's gift from start to finish. We don't play the major role. If we did, we'd probably go around bragging that we had done the whole thing. I want to close this message with a word picture for you. One of my favorite sporting events of the year is the Masters Golf Tournament in Georgia at Augusta National. I love it, not just because of the quality of the players that play there, but I just love the scenery. I like the beautiful azaleas in bloom, perfectly manicured fairways and perfectly manicured greens, and the way the course is laid out. I just love it. So say this year I get the idea after watching it, hey, you know, I think I'm going to join Augusta National. So I write a letter. And I get a letter back and said, we received your letter, Mr. Emery, and we sure thank you for your interest in becoming a member of Augusta National Golf Club. But we just wanted to tell you that we have a very limited membership. I mean, it doesn't include me, no. We have a very limited membership. In fact, we only have 300 members. And you can't just join, you have to be invited to join. And you need to know it's very, very expensive. Thousands of dollars in membership fees. Thousands of dollars. So we just want to let you know that it would be impossible for you to join. And so I'm a little bit disgusted, irritated, disappointed, and I wad the letter up and I throw it in the trash can. Of all things, that exclusive place. Then I hear about another golf club nearby, but in another state. And so I think, well, I hear that's really a nice place, so I'm going to write and see if I can join that. So I write a letter to join, and I get another letter back from them. And sure enough, they're more exclusive than Augusta National. And there are country clubs that are more exclusive than Augusta National, by the way. They're more exclusive than Augusta National. And all the similar requirements. Invitation only, limited membership. I start to tear the letter up, and then I notice there's a P.S. at the bottom. And it says, by the way, Mr. Emery, we have been holding on to an invitation for you for a long time. It's just been waiting for you to come and claim it. It's all written out to you. And not only that, though our membership fees are expensive, it's all paid for. Your fees are all paid for. All you got to do is come and claim your invitation. And we are very exclusive. Only a certain number of members. Here's what our limit is on membership. Whosoever will. Whoever will come. Whoever will accept the invitation. You have to be willing to accept the invitation. That's the only limitation. And you can come and claim it. Now, I think that Second Country Club is really the picture of what our Christian faith is all about. Is it exclusive? It sure is. It's very exclusive. And it's expressed by the words in Revelation 22. Again, whosoever will may come. Will. Emphasis on the will. You have to be willing. That's the limitation. By the way, that's what keeps people back from joining. Just not willing. Oh, and it's expensive. In fact, it's so expensive that there's no amount of money in the world that can pay for that membership. But God paid for it with the greatest coinage in the universe. Peter says in 1 Peter, the precious blood of Jesus. And it's by invitation only. You have to be invited. And then the letter that comes back to me says, now, we have enclosed your invitation just for your convenience. So I pull it out, and I find that I have been invited. I have to just be willing. Well, you and I have an invitation that's just been waiting on us. For some of us, it's been waiting a long time. It's already written out to us. All we have to do is claim it. And it says this when we open it up. Jesus Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. And then it says, from the words of Jesus in Matthew's gospel, come to me, all you who are weary, all you who are burdened with your sin, with your striving and religiosity. Come to me, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke, that which connects you to the Father, is easy, and my burden is light. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Sounds like a pretty good deal. In fact, such a good deal, I think it's worth accepting and risk being called narrow-minded and exclusive. Joining a group that other people call narrow-minded and exclusive. And it's also worth, listen carefully, it's also worth preparing to tell the story so that without arguing, without debating, in a gentle, loving way, you can share with friends and neighbors who still today believe that there are many paths to God. Let's pray. Lord, I pray today For that person who may be here who has not accepted that invitation that has been written out for them and been held for so long. And I pray today that they simply receive it by being willing to come, by being willing to trust you alone for salvation, by willing to trust you to connect them with God. I pray for that this morning, that they will open their hearts to you. And then I pray for this, that Lord, you'll help us to be prepared, to listen to Peter's words, and to be prepared in a gentle, loving, non-argumentative, non-debating way to share the truth of Jesus Christ, who is the only way, the only truth, the only life, with our friends and family members who still believe there is more than one way to connect